on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hey, so welcome. This will be the first episode of Propaganda Loves You Book Club. And the book that we decided to pick for the first one is On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. The way that we're doing the book club, just so everyone knows, we're kind of have a rotation here. So each of us, Joe, Arthur, and I gets to pick a book, and we'll just keep going down this list of books that we want to pick. And the one I picked first was On Tyranny because it obviously came out after Trump's first election. I think it hit the New York Times bestseller list back then, but it's a very short book. It's really digestible and has the main points that it's trying to get across. And I think it's very easy to read. I think for the most part, it's pretty clear and it doesn't take a huge time commitment. So we thought this would be a good one to start with to show how we're going to approach the book club. And it's a good, easier book to start with that's also topical and relevant to pretty much everything that we've been talking about on the show. The only other thing that I think I'd want to mention as a primer into this episode is that Timothy Snyder, actually a little bit of background on him. Timothy Snyder, Yale University professor, is a historian that basically specializes in history of Central and Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. He was the Richard C. Lewis professor at Yale University. And he actually transferred to the University of Toronto along with Jason Stanley, who also has written a bunch of books on fascism and was a professor at Yale University. Both of them have recently transferred to Toronto based off of what's going on in the United States. And I think as we kind of get into the book and talk about some of the different sections, it's going to make sense why, because he kind of explains in the book why someone would want to do that. But yeah, that's a setup for why we picked this book. And then, let's kind of get into it. I'm ready.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of ways we could get into the book to talk about it. Like you said, is a very reader-friendly book, not only in the fact that it's kind of short, but the chapters, there are 20 chapters, 20 lessons, because the subtitle is 20 Lessons on the 20th Century. You can sort of go through each rule or each lesson that he gives you and sort of digest it and think about it. So that's one way we could do it. We could just sort of go down the list and talk about each one in turn. I was curious because I have a lot of my own readerly reactions to the book, just sort of things I was thinking about as I was reading, things I was noticing or whatever. Did any of the rules, any of the 20 lists, do you guys have any, do they all are immediately yes, I 100% agree, that makes sense, let's do it? Or are there any that's what do you actually mean there? I'm not quite sure if I agree with that. Is there anything that jumps out to you in the list that you kind of hesitate about or aren't sure about?
I didn't have any immediate negative reactions, nothing visceral, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was said or anything like that. I mean, in the context of when it was written and who it was really written about, I think makes sense. But if you just take them as general advice, I don't know that it applies in a lot of situations. In the context of what it was written, I don't think there was anything that to me jumped out that I immediately was like, I disagree with that 100%. The one that I think I would know, and actually, Joe, I think you actually had this issue with it when you were reading it, but was just the section on the media, the way that he kind of talked about the media and what you should do. I don't know. It seemed to me like if we were thinking of that from a mainstream media, Fox News, MSNBC perspective, that the things that he's putting out don't make any sense, if that's what you're thinking of as mainstream media. But if you're more like a Reuters journalist or someone at AP that's credentialed, then it makes sense to me. But yeah, that was kind of one of the things that was a little bit weird.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. He insisted that people pay for subscriptions to journalism, that you should expect to pay for good journalism, and you should do it. It was almost like a moral imperative. You have a duty to pay for good journalism, and if you have the money to do so, by all means, yes. But if we're talking about how a healthy society gets its information, not everybody's going to have the money to subscribe to New York Times for, I don't know, whatever it is, $10 a month. There has to be a model where, and I think Drop Site News is one, they're reader funded, or Democracy Now!, which I've watched for years and highly recommend, is just viewer funded, publicly supported media, but freely available. Anybody can watch it, but they're always asking people to subscribe, and the people who have the means to do so. It's also how a successful podcast runs. It's available for free to everybody, and the listeners who really like it and have the available money to do so support the shows they like, And, if it's a good show, it stays supported. That's kind of, I feel like, how the journalism should work. So I was just kind of surprised that he was like, no, you should expect to pay for good journalism. It's like, why? Why are we doing that? Like, come on. But yeah, I guess I didn't necessarily mean which of the rules do you disagree with or whatever, but some like immediately make sense. Not obey in advance.
Yeah.
Rule number 1 or lesson number 1.
Yeah.
Totally agree. In any situation. Like, I'm kind of annoying about that as a worker. Like, if a boss is like, you need to do this, if it doesn't immediately make sense to me, I'm like, why? Explain. I'm not just going to obey in advance. But another one, like, beware the one-party state, which is lesson number 3. Yeah, like, I agree with it, obviously. I'm not a fan of a one-party state. But I also think we live in a world where we believe we have a two-party state that has basically functioned as a one-party state for a long time. Like, the illusion of the opposition is kind of, they're on the same team in a lot of ways. And I think that's an even more insidious roadblock to freedom for most people, is the fact that both of these parties refuse to budge on corporate taxes, on universal health care, on free housing and education, free school lunches. Like, there are basic human things we can do that neither party does anything about ever. And it's like, on those really important issues, we basically already have a one-party state, And so, yeah, there's that. And I also was curious what you guys thought about the Voldemort move throughout the book. Like, the whole book is basically a letter to Donald Trump in a lot of ways, or a long subtweet of Donald Trump, but he never says his name in the whole book. It's kind of wild.
Oh, I thought you were talking about when I think it was the epilogue when he was talking about Harry Potter as a resistance book. But yeah, actually I didn't think about that. Yeah, he doesn't really mention it at all, does he? Yeah, that's crazy.
He brings up Harry Potter a few times.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point too, I think that, it suffers from a bit of lack of maybe class warfare struggle, and it's highlighting the political side a little heavy. And he could say things like, those who could afford should pay for newspapers or defend the institutions. And yeah, a lot of them made a lot of sense. I really liked number 1 and number 4 and 13. The only one that I kind of like, maybe I was like tired or something, because I was reading it Friday night, and the only time I had a not negative thought, but like the chapter 12, it says, make eye contact in small talk. And I just kind of thought, that's like something a boomer says. Like, there's a lot of different types of people, and I know a lot of youth who do not make eye contact or small talk, and they're deathly afraid of it, and they're afraid to engage with people over like the telephone or something. So I just thought maybe, but I understand the, narrative of it. I just kind of thought boomerism.
Yeah. No, I feel that a little bit. Yeah. No, I think there are like, and I feel this way about just about any text I read, whether it's a student paper or an academic book or whatever. I'm always looking at what's the overall argument of this thing I'm reading? What's the overall point? What's the so what message? One grad school professor I had was always like, you have to be able to answer the so what question with anything you write. And I think that's true. And part of me is thinking like, what is going on with that here? I got the message through his tone and the way he was talking about everything that, yeah, he's kind of, there's a little bit of out of touchness to me culturally here. I like my historians to tell me what their biases are, right? Everybody's got a bias. Everybody's got a perspective. I like people to just come right out and tell me what it is that their point of view is. The first thing that sort of made my eyebrows go up a little bit is conflation of Nazis and communists as like equally evil things. And I'm not like here to defend the honor of the USSR or anything. At the same time, there is a difference between overt racist, fascist cruelty and like and something that is not, that is a different kind of project, has mistakes from authoritarianism and different lessons to learn. There was a way he was conflating these things and at the same time never defining them. Communism specifically never gets defined in the book, but it's constantly mentioned as like an evil thing. Communism as a political ideology emerges in response to capitalism, which is sort of an unspoken player in this book that isn't mentioned until the epilogue, which I also thought was strange. Like, yes, we can add up the body count of communist regimes and talk about why that's bad and what's wrong with that, and we should do that. But we should also do that with all of the capitalist regimes and all of the harm they've caused and all the people they've killed. And there's this sense that we just don't ever talk about the harm that capitalism has done to the world and is still doing to the world. But we will frequently talk about all the harm that communism has done, but not talk about the literacy rates they've improved, for example, right? So I was just kind of frustrated that that was an obvious bias of his to me that he never spoke about. As an author, I feel like it's important to like kind of narrate your own perspective in a way that your reader can't argue with, right? If he had taken a moment in the beginning to sort of spell out what his point of view was, why he was looking at it this way, why he was mentioning certain ideologies and not others, I would have felt a lot better, because at least he's being transparent, you know what I mean? Kind of like upfront about it. His orientation to the reader made me feel like he assumed I either had the exact same worldview he had, or that he wasn't aware that it was possible for me to have a different one. You know what I mean? So that was just kind of a readerly frustration I was having as I read the book. And again, it's easy to pick out the bad things, because there's a lot of good in this book. Like, a lot of these lessons are very valuable and important and necessary, and I appreciated the way he articulated them really clearly. The beginning of each chapter has that short little bold paragraph that is the so what for each chapter. It's like, here's the point. And I really appreciated that, and I thought he did a great job with that. So yeah, there's a good and a bad there with the reader experience.
I was trying to think where my head's going, Joe, is like, I'm trying to think through, like, so we're talking about the dangers of fascism and drawing parallels to current day, and this would have been, what, like 2017, to European fascism and whatnot. What I'm struggling with trying to find the words for is like, why isn't that part of the conversation? Why is like, so we talk about communism as a direct result or response to capitalism. We talk about fascism versus democracy, but we don't talk about capitalism in the context of other political systems most of the time. Like, because it's not a political system. You know what I mean? Like, but it influences the political system. So I guess, like, what responsibility people have to bring that in, I guess, is what I'm thinking, or trying to think through the right words to describe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to talk about capitalism purely in economic terms and pretend like there aren't politics involved. When I read a history like Howard Zinn's, for example, it feels clear to me that the entire history of the U.S. government has been to serve a specific kind of capitalist class that began with the colonists and the slave owners and the factory owners and everything, and kind of developed into the technocracy oligarchy we have now. But there's always been a sort of capitalist ruling class that has had all the influence on the government. And I think it's convenient to separate government from capitalism rhetorically for the capitalists. They don't want to talk about capitalism as a political system because they don't want to acknowledge the fact that governments exist to do the bidding of the capitalist class. But even, Nancy Pelosi says of the Democratic Party, we're capitalists, get over it. I think that's a verbatim quote, if not far off, but someone asked her about it, and she was like, yeah, we're capitalists, get over it.
There's an ETF that just tracks Pelosi's trades, and it skyrockets, okay?
But yeah, for me, I feel like, especially when it comes to the U.S., there's this hesitation to admit that the U.S. government is the defense mechanism of capitalism. Mm-hmm. Its military is used around the world to protect and defend capitalism.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to be more honest about that. Because, communism is a political system, but it also wants to do something very specific about the market, because it's all one human life integrated together. We have to take care of it together. So in my mind, you used 4 words there. You said capitalism and communism, and then fascism and democracy. And for me, those 4 kind of pair nicely. I think of communism as, like, in its ideal form, as the best form of democracy. And I think of, like, capitalism and fascism as inevitabilities together. Like, when you have a capitalist system, if the logic of grow reaches a certain point, it inevitably leads to fascism. I think that's the critique a lot of people on the left would say.
And so, like, we've got a lot of different books out there that talk about political systems and talk about how we end up or how we stay away from fascism, but without acknowledging capitalism at all in that conversation. Like, we don't really get the entire picture, or I guess all the tools that we would need to actually fight back against those sort of things. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and the thing is, there is a large, fully developed, over 150-year history of intellectual work critiquing the systems of capitalism. And it starts with a guy named Karl Marx who wrote a book called Capital. The whole point of the book is to understand how capitalism works and really get into the nuts and bolts of how it exploits the working class to extract surplus value for the capitalist class. But I think because of the history of the 20th century, we don't talk about that, because rhetorically it all got lumped in with the big bad communists in Eastern Europe. And so because of everything they did, we're not allowed to talk about what Karl Marx wrote before the big bad Eastern European governments ever existed. Right? So convenient that we just can't talk about it.
And that's because the insinuation there is that if you, well, I mean, in our history episode, you betcha you would describe yourself as a Marxist, and as soon as you say that, then people think, oh, well, this guy is a Stalin stan, or he like promotes the CCP, or like something like that, right? Like one of those things where it's really just like more of a, no, like, I appreciate the original writings in their form, and not how those governments had interpreted them in a way that was beneficial to them, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we should talk about the book. I don't want to take up too much time with this sidebar on communism or whatever, but from my point of view as like a student of history, I feel like I haven't done the work as a student yet on Eastern Europe and on the Chinese Revolution and on all these regimes that my culture has told me since childhood are very, very bad and I should not trust them. I'm not saying I do trust them or don't trust them. I'm saying I want to do the work of learning about them before I really make an honest assessment about that. But from what I've read of Karl Marx, yeah, I agree with his takes. And I think you don't really need to look outside the history of the United States to understand how the system of capitalism works. You can just read U.S. history alongside Capital and understand how capitalism has determined the history of the United States. You don't ever have to talk about the USSR to understand that much. And so can we at least talk about that in this country? How capitalism has totally dominated our lives and made a lot of us miserable? I think we need to. But yeah.
Arthur, anything from your perspective that you want to hit on broadly? Because I was kind of thinking we could quickly just walk through each and like give our hot takes on each one of those lessons.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. How about I read each one off and then you guys rapid fire your hot takes about them one.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is just the reader friendly version where you have the title and then you have the bold so what, and then it gets into the chapter after that. But I'm just going to do this part and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So rule number 1, do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do.
Yeah, hot take. I guess I thought about social media and I thought about the algorithm and how people are just silently and passively being like, cool, I got my own algorithm of news and media, and that's normal. And I think it's about, that's kind of obeying in advance. That's not a normal thing. It's highly programmed to be curtailed to your opinion and you're getting targeted, and that is not normal.
That's interesting. So basically it's like you're obeying in advance by not questioning what you're being fed.
Yeah, if you're just on Instagram using that feed, doing the likes or whatever and promoting that whole thing, it's like you're just promoting the algorithm, giving you your media and digesting that and just being like, oh, well, I can be in a bubble or a Facebook community that nobody ever changes their opinion on. It's consenting to the algorithm.
I was thinking from that, like the things that came to my mind were all the tech companies that each gave like $1 million to inauguration campaign, like to be there. I think it was the ABC lawsuit that they settled for the 60 Minutes thing, like with Kamala Harris's interview. What legal backing was there for settling that at all? How about the law firms that are right now offering up pro bono work to the administration so that they don't get targeted? All of these things are examples of complying in advance for a lot of them. And like, I think initially when I started seeing that, I was like, well, that's the world that we're going to have to play in. But then it's like, that's exactly what I think the lesson is trying to say, don't do, right? Because if you do that, then it's going to be, oh, well, they're giving me this for nothing. Like, what can I get next? You know?
Yeah, totally. It's really disheartening to see like major institutions and even executive branches just like go along with all those. Oh yeah, you want us to fire half our people? Sure, you're gone. They're gone. Don't worry about it. Like, just seems very cowardly from an institutional point of view. Like, come on, stand up a little bit. But yeah, a lot of people are scared, and they're gonna do it in advance just to make the big scary person happy. It's like trauma theory, really. Like, a traumatized kid is gonna go hide. They're not gonna be trouble. They're not gonna make trouble for you or whatever. But yeah, I also thought about people at the border or coming through customs, getting their phones taken, and they're like, open your phone. Why are you opening your phone? Don't open your phone. Do not unlock your phone for them. Like, they have to legally, I mean, yeah, it's scary because they're going to do what they want. And especially if you don't have privilege, if you fit one of the groups that they hate, you're in a much more precarious position than I am in. So it's one thing for me to say it, another thing for you to do it. But they need to be able to say that you're like an immediate terroristic threat in order for you to open your phone legally. So just be patient and wait and don't open your phone.
Number 2.
Defend institutions. It is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of our institutions unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves. They fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choose an institution you care about, a court, a newspaper, a law, a labor union, and take its side.
Love it. I thought about courts and judges and how a lot of the time I only hear people talk about Supreme Court cases and people don't even like show up to vote for who their judge is going to be. And I think that it just made me think about on like the local level, you know, you got to get involved locally. And I also disagree with the whole, you can speak about the institution if you don't act on its behalf, that's fine. You can call it our institution. I don't know.
Yeah. Gatekeeping. Gatekeeping who can help there. Oh, man. The thing that came to mind for me, like when, I mean, you guys know this, but anyone listening doesn't. So like when USAID was originally, I think the first time they tried to shut it down or something like that, there was all those different institutions that have either been shut down or merged or in some scenario or are in the process of being shut down or reduced. I was thinking about all of those things and how there are quite a few of them that are going through the court system still. There's a lot of legal arguments or a lot of legal cases that are being put against the Trump administration, but we're also seeing some of these fail. I think the Supreme Court just said that the federal government can fire all those probationary workers. It's concerning. I think this one hit hard just because we watched it happen, you know, and we watched these institutions fall. Or we're watching it right now. So I think that definitely was one that kind of hit hard for me as I was reading through that.
Yeah, that one's, it's offensive, US aid, you know, particularly where it's like you're giving people, like in some cases, you know, some of the money I saw, it goes to like giving people who newly come into this country, like an apple and a pencil and an eraser and a Barbie, and that's it. And it's like, you know, $18 for the stuff and they just want to cut it.
The thing is, when I think about the institutions that they went after, it was basically all the institutions that were investigating someone in the administration in some way. Like, I mean, the SEC, the FTC, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, how is that helping any American that is shut down? Like, at any stage, like that's what's keeping people from getting grifted and taken advantage of. And the USAID thing was like, that was basically one of our pillars of being able to use soft power in the world, which we'll probably talk about more, but it's basically like soft power as in not using military force. And you take that completely away, like you've only got certain tools left to continue to exert influence across the world.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add to that. I think the only thing I guess I have to add is that like institutions need to do a good job of explaining the good that they do to the public. Like, because when they're trying to erode all these institutions, they're trying to the Trump administration specifically is trying to tell you a story that gets you to identify with them as the victims. And so you think of these institutions as big bad bullies that are just punishing this poor guy who just wants to be president, please. And it's like the institution has to have a counter story, a counter narrative that tells a different thing, that explains the good work they do in the world and why it's necessary. And I think U.S. institutions have been bureaucratized a lot to where it's very confusing, the work they do. It's very hard to really understand what's really necessary about it. So it's also a call, I feel like, to institutions to step up in defining yourself if you want to be defended, right? USAID does a lot of good humanitarian work in the world. I never really heard about them for most of my life, you know?
Yeah.
If they do really good work, tell us about it. Make it a big deal.
The only stories you heard about USAID are like, it's money going overseas. Like, that's pretty much it, right? Like, that's, yeah, not great. Yeah. Actually, Joe, you said something there about like the bureaucratic kind of process that can stop those good stories from coming out. It's absolutely true. Like, it's more of like, let's keep doing what we're doing and try to get no news to come out, because any news is bad news or could be used as bad news, right? Like that's a lot of the mindset there, is like more concern about news getting out than it is trying to promote the things that are occurring too.
Absolutely. Number 3, beware the one-party state. The parties that remade states and suppressed rivals were not omnipotent from the start. They exploited a historic moment to make political life impossible for their opponents, to support the multi-party system and defend the rules of democratic elections. Vote in local and state elections while you can. Consider running for office.
We talked about that one a little bit before.
Yeah, abolish the Electoral College and support proportional representation.
i.e. cancel the Senate. Anyway. Number 4. Take responsibility for the face of the world. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Notice the swastikas and the other signs of hate. Do not look away and do not get used to them. Remove them yourself and set an example for others to do so.
No disagreement from me there. Maybe what we could do is we could sell like a special spray paint or something that's super hard to get off. And it fits in your pocket. It's like the little denazification spray paint or something like that. I don't know. We could probably figure something out.
We could call it whiteout.
Oh my God.
All right, we're making that.
I thought about how, like, responsibility face of the world. I thought internet's kind of like a face of the world today. And it made me think about Trump's Gaza video and how revolting that was and how not normal that was.
Yeah.
Don't check it out.
Especially appreciate the do not get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's hard. I mean, what you were saying earlier about the algorithm, Arthur, and just sort of like not consenting to what it's giving to you. It's hard for most people to do that, like to intentionally use it in that way. Like it's hard. But yeah, you cannot let yourself get used to signs of hate. Number 5, remember professional ethics. When political leaders set a negative example, professional commitments to just practice become more important. It is hard to subvert a rule of law state without lawyers, or to hold show trials without judges. Authoritarians need obedient civil servants, and concentration camp directors seek businessmen interested in cheap labor.
Yeah, I think my thought on this one is just, there are definitely some people that are remembering professional ethics, and those are the people that are getting fired right now. But like, hopefully there are more. It's great to see when people just like the Eric Adams case is what came to mind. Like how many federal prosecutors refused to drop the case against him or refused to put that out. Like that was awesome to see. Unfortunately, they finally found someone that would do it. But yeah, stuff like that is great to fight back against that.
I thought about Clarence Thomas and all of his RV and vacations, and then I thought just the Supreme Court in general.
Yeah, here Brett likes beer.
Brett likes a lot of things.
Number 6.
Just like as
Sorry,
an
go ahead.
aside that I don't even know if I would put this in the show, but like when I originally was watching the Brett Kavanaugh confirmations, I thought like this is a complete joke. There's absolutely no way they allow this person to go in. At the same time, I was like on Reddit, like reading about like his sexual assault history and partying and college and who he partied with, and I was just like, this is an absolute joke. And then, boom, that was like another, I don't know, moment. That was crazy.
Yeah, I think I was really shocked at that moment too. Like, it was very shocking. And ever since then, anytime a total clown comes up for nomination, I'm like, oh, they're good. They're definitely getting in. It does not matter. Everything's fake. Like Pete Hegseth? Oh my God. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised that Matt Gaetz didn't make it, but the only reason he didn't make it is because he had, what is it? Like, he could have brought down others. Or
Pedo issues?
Yeah.
Totally.
Like, Jesus.
Well, this one's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Be wary of paramilitaries. When the men with guns who have always claimed to be against the system start wearing uniforms and marching with torches and pictures of a leader, the end is nigh. When the pro-leader paramilitary and the official police and military intermingle, the end has come.
I liked his conversation a bit about how the police and military kind of bled into one monolith of like control, and how the police actually did a lot more of these direct shootings than the SS, who were running the concentration camps doing another form of killing, and how governments use that to flatten that hierarchy of whatever the statehood of having that power. And it's really scary.
I agree. I had no idea, right, that it was mostly police that were doing that. And I would think that most people would think, oh no, it was probably the SS that did all of it. Like there had to be this small group of, really evil people doing all of the evil shit. And it's like, no, a lot of those people probably never thought they would even be in that sort of position. But as I guess everyone kind of shifted in that direction, and then they find themselves in those situations, and they're the ones that are doing that, not just this, evil group of people somewhere.
Don't look up the numbers on how many people U.S. police forces kill every year. You won't like the numbers that you see.
Yeah. Or what did it say? When they combine, that's the end is near. It's like, how many videos
The end
do
is
we
come
have
if they
of,
combine.
Yeah, police officers helping white supremacist groups like into trucks and out of like dangerous situations and protecting them. Yeah.
I mean, literally another Rage Against the Machine song.
Yeah.
Those that work forces are the same that burn crosses.
Yeah.
That's the line.
Whenever I think of Rage Against the Machine now, I always go back to that. There's like, was it Rand Paul? Was that the guy, or Paul Rand?
Oh, no. The house guy, the little nerd. What was his name?
Yeah, I'm so glad he like disappeared.
He ran for president in like 2012.
Yeah, but it was during
Or no,
that he was on the talk.
He was Mitt Romney's running mate in 2012.
That's right.
Paul Ryan.
But he did an interview.
Yeah, Paul
Ryan.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
I forgot his name. 2 first names. Red flag. But yeah, he did an interview. Yeah, you're right. And he was like, I love Rage Against the Machine. They're the best. And Tom Morello was like, what the fuck did he say? No.
Yeah.
It's great. This one kind of confused me a little bit. I mean, it's about weapons and arms, but maybe you guys understand it better than I do. I'm just not 100% clear on what the message is. Be reflective if you must be armed. If you carry a weapon in public service, may God bless you and keep you. But know that evils of the past involved policemen and soldiers finding themselves one day doing irregular things. Be ready to say no.
I think this one just goes kind of into, it almost sounds more pointed than just the professional ethics, right? Professional ethics, they're talking about like lawyers and those types of services, like refusing to do things that go against the code. But that to me is just like, if you carry a gun for the government, then when someone orders you to use it in a way that's like immoral, don't do it, right? Like it sounds like that's pretty much what they're saying is like, you might get ordered to shoot protesters. Don't do it when that actually occurs,
Yeah, they fire those guys.
The ones that don't do it.
Yeah.
It's weird how they're always throwing out the good apples. Like, That made more. I think I thought reflective literally when I first read it, like be like reflective gear, like if you're going to be in the street or something. And I was just like, what? Oh, I'm just confused.
Also,
I
not
get
a
what you
bad
mean
idea,
now,
though.
That's not bad at all.
I
Camouflage.
think that's like Hunter 101. Number 8, stand out. Someone has to. It is easy to follow along. It can feel strange to do or say something different, but without that unease, there is no freedom. Remember Rosa Parks. The moment you set an example, the spell of the status quo is broken, and others will follow.
I thought about people who get downvoted on these internet places, and I thought like how there's a theory out there called dead internet theory, where essentially there are all these bot farms in our country and other countries, and they kind of on one screen they can control maybe like 50 to hundreds of accounts, and at the same time they can go and like things and comment things, and they can promote people, but they can do something as nefarious as control an entire political election. And I just thought about like, just because you're downvoted, that's like a form of standing out, and you don't want to, so you always want to be upvoted or whatever, and so you kind of lean in to comment these things that you think people will upvote. So that's kind of what I thought about.
My thought on this one is like, this works both ways, right? Like, because go back 10 years in American politics, and the things that are occurring now daily would have been unfathomable, at least probably to the people in that time frame. It goes both ways, right? Like standing out and creating new norms or breaking norms. But definitely it's scarier when there's a legitimate concern for freedom or reprisal by standing out and speaking out. Absolutely needs to be something that's done. No disagreement on my part.
It's good to stand out, and it's hard to do. I mean, we're learning that with this podcast. It's hard to jump on and record, to be recorded or whatever, and to post your voice and stuff out there. It feels like you're kind of standing naked in the wind sometimes, and it's kind of scary, but it's a good feeling to get over. Not standing naked in the wind, but
that could be good to get over that. I don't know.
Standing out.
It depends on what your worldview is.
That took a weird direction. I wasn't really intending on that.
Yeah, if you think of it like, it's like talking to young men out there. It's like in school, I'm sure we've all experienced this, or you can say if you don't, because I don't want to speak for you, but it's all these cultural things to not stand out. But as you actually grow up and meet more people and live a wider spread life, you find that some of the most interesting people are like the people who are super passionate about these unique hobbies that are just so outlandish. And in high school and middle school, they would have been made fun of, but here they are with their own lives that are enriched, and they have something they're really interested in, and it's usually bringing good or joy to the world.
Love that. Yeah. You should peak well after high school, actually, not in high school.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do, so be one of them. Number 9, be kind to our language. Avoid pronouncing the phrases everyone else does. Think up your own way of speaking, even if only to convey the thing you think everyone is saying. Make an effort to separate yourself from the internet. Read books. Number 10, believe in truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power because there is no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. The biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights.
I feel like that's a topic that, we've talked about quite a bit. Actually, we've got an episode, I think we go into like 20 minutes talking about truth and provincial truth and all that. So yeah, that's a big one, right? If there's nothing factual and nothing verifiable, then there is no argument that we have, I guess, in that scenario.
And my writing students, I'm always like, you got to establish a shared foundation with your reader. You have to like lay out the groundwork. And I've talked about like the ground path fruition framework before, but yeah, you have to establish a ground, and then you stand on the ground together and you have a conversation. You can't just be floating through the air. Number 11, investigate. Figure things out for yourself. Spend more time with long articles. Subsidize investigative journalism by subscribing to print media. Realize that some of what is on the internet is there to harm you. Learn about sites that investigate propaganda campaigns, some of which come from abroad. Take responsibility for what you communicate with others.
Yeah, I like this. I think it was a little, just because it's print, though, is not good. Like, oligarchs started buying up newspapers in like 2012. So even before this book came out, he knew like Bezos owns the Washington Post or, whatever. And it's like, LA Times, I have family members who read just things like the LA Times or something, and there's a bias there. It's owned by somebody and they're putting out something. So don't just subscribe to one thing. Don't do just print media. You got to have multiple sources and check everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because, like, I had the same I like that rule a lot in general. I liked a lot of the things he said, but the print media thing stuck out too because I saw a meme somewhere online of like how if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or wherever on the internet, sometimes it'll say state China controlled media or Russia state controlled media, or it'll give a warning about the influence of that. But someone had made the joke / recommendation that all U.S. oligarchy controlled media should be the warning label on all those things. Number 12, make eye contact and small talk. This is not just polite, it is part of being a citizen and a responsible member of society. It is also a way to stay in touch with your surroundings, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. If we enter a culture of denunciation, you will want to know the psychological landscape of your daily life.
I know we talked about this one a little bit earlier too, but I think it says make eye contact and small talk. I mean, maybe another way you could interpret that is like find groups with shared values and just go meet with them when they have meetings, right? And stare at the floor the whole time. That's fine. But just go and meet people that have similar values, it gets to it later when the unthinkable happens, but you need to have those groups that are in real life people that you can reach out to when bad stuff happens. You have to know where those people are and be able to connect with them, right? It's definitely an important thing to have that community.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I wish it could be rewritten to be like stay in touch with people, define a community, have community outreach, That's good.
Well, Timothy means well, but his boomer bias shows sometimes. That's okay. Rule number 13, practice corporeal politics. Power wants your body softening in your chair and your emotions dissipating on the screen. Get outside. Put your body in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people. Make new friends and march with them.
I think it makes people feel better, get out, you feel that sense of community and get that vitamin D.
It just kind of sounded like touch grass, but I like grass.
Yeah,
touch definitely. It sometimes.
Joe, when you explained that one, that actually, when you were reading it, I didn't know what corporeal meant, so thanks for telling me what that
I did. I paused when I saw corporeal. I was like, there's no way he's just going to drop corporeal and not explain what that means. Yeah. It's about the body, the corpse. So, just a little reader-friendly thing I did. Number 14, establish a private life. Nastier rulers will use what they know about you to push you around. Scrub your computer of malware on a regular basis. Remember that email is skywriting. Consider using alternative forms of the internet or simply using it less. Have personal exchanges in person. For the same reason, resolve any legal trouble. Tyrants seek the hook on which to hang you. Try not to have hooks.
To be honest, this one's a little weird for me. And the reason I say that is because I think we are rapidly approaching a point where private life, if you live online at all, just isn't going to exist. That's not going to be a thing that people have if you're posting and putting that online. So, but at the same time, the internet is how we communicate and build larger networks than what we can do in our town. So I think it's there has to be some comfort, right, in just making sure that what you're doing online and what you're putting online, just assume that, that's all going to be out in the open at some point, especially if people want to target you. They'll find ways to find out what you've been writing or doing online. So, I would just say, hey, be comfortable with what you put online is maybe what my advice would be, and just assume that it's going to be public at some point. And that's my only argument with this one.
Yeah, I agree. I love it.
Yeah. Number 15, contribute to good causes. Be active in organizations, political or not, that express your own view of life. Pick a charity or two and set up autopay. Then you will have made a free choice that supports civil society and helps others to do good.
I like the autopay thing. I got some autopay charity stuff going on. I think also it's important to look at local things. There's GoFundMe's and there's bail funds and things like that, locally, that you could engage with more instead of just autopay and kind of forget. That's how I kind of read it, but maybe it doesn't mean it that way.
I love the bail fund shout out. That's a good one. Yeah, local bail funds is a huge way you can help your local community. Number 16, learn from peers in other countries. Keep up your friendships abroad or make new friends in other countries. The present difficulties in the United States are an element of a larger trend, and no country is going to find a solution by itself. Make sure you and your family have passports.
Yeah. So this one to me is like, it's especially relevant to just our show and what we've been talking about when it comes to propaganda, because other countries have absolutely learned more about how to combat certain forms of propaganda and disinformation. They've put in place, like we talk about in the fascism episodes about Finland and their education system to identify disinformation. Like, it's absolutely going to be huge for us over the next few years, because we're not going to get anything like that from the U.S. government for sure. And I highly doubt that we're going to get anything from U.S. tech, because it's going to go against what the government says. So they're not going to put anything that's going to help us in that form. So yeah, couldn't agree more with this one.
Yeah, I kind of thought in an analogy of the Hunger Games. And I kind of thought about how, we're in the center. We're number one in the center zone. And you got to have friends outside in the tertiary zones to know what's really going on in the whole world globally. So I think, keeping an outside perspective is very important.
Yeah, that's great. Like, if you think about Hunger Games, like the whole map as like a metaphor for the whole world we live in, they had to unite the class, the working class along the whole. We have to do that with the world. The only way we're going to unite the working class is to talk to workers in other countries and figure out what they do and learn from each other. Yeah. See, this is what art can do for you. Read books. This is good. Number 17, listen for dangerous words. Be alert to the use of the words extremism and terrorism. Be alive to the fatal notions of emergency and exception. Be angry about the treacherous use of patriotic vocabulary.
I mean, like, it's a little dark, but I thought about like how they're deporting these people, and they call them gang members, or whatever, the dangerous words that they use to do that. And then you actually find out, like, one is a queer makeup artist and the other's a father and actually should be back. And that's some extremist language going on when they choose to deport these people.
The thing that kind of came to my mind for this too is there's been a lot of talk about like fentanyl labs in Canada, and like how there's an extreme amount of fentanyl coming across the border from Canada, and all the talk about these things. And it's like, I think it's like 0.2% or 2%. Like, it's very small amount coming across the Canadian border versus other places, but we're using this extreme language saying like, oh, it's this crisis of fentanyl coming from Canada. Why? Well, why did we say there were weapons labs in Iraq? And why did we say they were trying to create weapons of mass destruction? What did that lead to, right? It's building justification for future actions. So yeah, definitely need to be aware when you start hearing that language and investigate, right? Look into it. Find like whatever. I think that was number 14. Like, investigate it. Find out like what that actual emergency, so-called emergency, actually is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Number 18, be calm when the unthinkable arrives. Modern tyranny is terror management. When the terrorist attack comes, remember that authoritarians exploit such events in order to consolidate power. The sudden disaster that requires the end of checks and balances, the dissolution of opposition parties, the suspension of freedom of expression, the right to a fair trial, and so on, is the oldest trick in the Hitlerian book. Do not fall for it.
Was this, I was trying to remember, was this the chapter with the rhino analogy? Like with people turning into rhinos when it was talking about Nazi Germany? I only had it on audio, so I couldn't go back and...
I wanted to say yes, but I can't find it now.
Well, either way, that was really interesting to me, the way that they kind of watched people convert into Nazis back in the day. It was like, it started with this big group, and then slowly people would convert. And the analogy of like turning into a rhino, basically turning into a Nazi. Yeah, the only comment that I wanted to make there, though, was, this is early in Hitler's rule that was actually taking place. So like, for a lot of people in Germany, it felt like things were actually going really well. So people are converting to Nazism, like as they're seeing like them come out of this economic downturn. I'm just interested in seeing like, does that trend carry over when the U.S. economic system is going in the tanker? like, does that still happen? Or, basically did Donald Trump and the current administration fuck up by not making things better first. Like that's what they're supposed to do to get followers. But yeah, that was just an interesting story to me, and like I like the way that kind of represented that.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about too, because it's like, it depends on who it gets better for. Like, as long as you make it better for the right people. Did you guys see the video of him like being like, hey buddy, you guys all made a lot of money, right? You're happy? Like,
Yeah, he like patted somebody on the shoulder and was like, he made 900 million yesterday. It's like, because you told him when to buy it. And now he heads up the SEC for investigation. Under executive order, they have to follow the rule of law of the executive branch.
It's no coincidence that all that took place after they gutted the SEC, right? Like that's totally just happenstance.
My only hope of a happy thought is like there's some like White House aide out there who now has like $300 million because they just like bet it all after hearing something and like serving Donald Trump a Coke.
that would be really, I don't know, that would be a hilarious, like, little biopic of that one little individual intern who just made it big. Oh no, that's really funny to think of. Number 19, be a patriot. Set a good example of what America means for the generations to come. They will need it.
This one I did want to comment on just because I think the way that he kind of goes into nationalism versus patriotism, I think is really an important distinction to make, because when we think about patriotism in the United States, a lot of time, I think people think like, if you're critical of the United States, that you're not patriotic to the United States. And I like the way that he broke it out as basically the opposite, right? In order to be like a good patriot of a country, you have to be critical, you have to learn from the past, and you have to try and fix those mistakes. That form of patriotism, make your country better for the people in it and the people that the country interacts with. I think that's super important, because if you're not patriotic at all, or you don't have any care for your country, then why are you gonna fix it? Why not just leave if there's no drive to make things better? But anyway, that's my thought on that.
Yeah, definitely. And like being a patriot to like the principles and ideology rather than like an identity politic of like your identity is tied to a political party or a political person that you're kind of putting up on a pedestal.
Yeah, I struggle with that one because I feel like there's better language than patriotism to use. Like, I just want people to care about other human beings. You know what I mean? I want human beings to identify with each other collectively, all of us. I don't give a shit if you live in Bangladesh or Bolivia or Cuba or here. Like, you're a human being. You're beautiful and you matter. And I identify you as the same as me in that way. And I think we just need more of that. I don't want to... You said something like, you know, if you're not patriotic, what are the reasons for wanting to improve or care about the country? And I think that patriotism for me unnecessarily emphasizes the story of the nation state in a way that we don't need in order to care for each other. Like, we can care for our local human beings where we are without having to share an identity of, we're from the US of A. Like, human beings were here taking care of each other before the US of A came over and did their whole thing, right? Like, let's get back to some of that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just frustrated with the word, I guess, patriot. I feel like we can stoke compassion and community caring and a desire to do good without saying you have to, you know, pledge some kind of allegiance to a nation state identity. I don't know. But I'm just kind of anarchistic in that way, so that's always going to frustrate me.
I had the exact same frustration as you, I think. And I think for me, I'll show my cards a little here and say that growing up, you know, a lot of what I heard, I grew up Catholic and then I made my own revelations of the world and decided to be atheist. And a lot of what I heard was like, oh, like, what's your moral? You can't be a good person. You can't care about the world, all this stuff. And it's like, you don't need a certain ideology, patriotism or religion or whatever to have a certain bound set of ethics of how to operate in the world and be empathetic to people. And if anything, I've actually seen that it is the people who have made those kind of individualistic choices for themselves that have the most of those values.
I guess the only thing I would say in relation to that is, if I think about this in the context of how the book was written, right? A concern that fascism is taking over the country. I think you almost need a similar populist front that people can latch onto to combat it. And so I think that's where patriotism does play a role, right? You have to want your country, in this case, America, to be better. I think it helps rally people if they're thinking about like, I want my country to be better. I don't want my country to fall into fascism. But I completely agree with what you're saying, Joe. Like the idea of everyone being just more compassionate at a human level, I mean, that would be ideal. Unfortunately, I think like we're very tribalistic as people, and some of us need something, sometimes to latch into there, or it helps with that group mentality sometimes to get movements moving. But I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying.
Yeah, it's a question of like rhetorical strategy. I think we're trying to achieve the same goal through different linguistic means or whatever. But yeah, if the idea of patriotism is useful rhetorically and getting people to do good for each other and to use the institutions that already do exist to take the power back from them and use them for good, like, yeah, that's a useful way to look at it. I also feel that human beings in general are good and compassionate naturally. Like a child is born, and if a 1 or 2 year old kid sees their sibling in pain, they sort of recognize that in a way that's obvious that they care about another child's pain. Whereas something like a national identity or hatred of another group or something has to be taught. And so I think part of the cynical strategy of the ruling class is to make us think that human beings are tribalistic and will naturally hate each other if we don't have these mechanisms in place that keep us under control and healthy and stuff. I think left to our own devices, we'll be a lot more peaceful than the ruling class wants us to think we'll be. And for me, that's sort of my low-key conceptual conspiracy theory. I think we're a lot better naturally as human beings than we give ourselves credit for, and we just sort of need the space to figure that out together.
Yeah.
The last one is really short, and I don't think we'll have any disagreements, but let's see. Number 20, be as courageous as you can. If none of us is prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny.
Hard disagree.
Oh man, no notes on that one for me.
Yeah.
Also had a funny moment with the book because he drops a couple of Hamlet quotes, and he like paraphrases Hamlet as a character and talks about him as being virtuous. And I've read Hamlet a couple of times, and I just thought that was really funny because I never get virtuous from Hamlet. Like, he is just an indecisive, anxious diva who has no idea what he's doing. And I just thought that was a really funny way to describe Hamlet.
So Joe, final comments. Would you recommend this book? And if you do recommend the book, anything that you would say, like any disclaimers that you would attach before recommending it?
I mean, the same disclaimer for any book. Definitely read it. It's short, or listen to it if you can hear it. But, understand your worldview before you start reading. Do a little homework on the author if you want. Google him. Do a little read up on him so you can get a feel of his perspective. And then let that negotiation between the perspectives take place as you read. Everything you read will influence you. Everything you write and other people read will influence them. So to read is to be influenced in some way. So the challenge as readers is just to be self-aware about that process as it's taking place and to make decisions about what or if you're going to change your worldview. Take it in and have an open mind.
Are there any last comments that you want to get in?
You're gonna make me follow that.
I can always move it around.
Yeah. Put this first, No, yeah, I think I would definitely recommend it. It kind of seems like it's written from kind of like a what I would call maybe like a Democrat, centrist kind of viewpoint, and it's definitely rooted in like this U.S. culture in the 20th century, so it's really relevant and potent in that. And I think from that perspective, yeah, it does a lot of good, and it's really digestible. Next up, we're going to be reading a book called When Affirmative Action Was White by Ira Katznelson. It goes into 20th century American history and demonstrates that all key programs passed during the New Deal and Fair Deal era of the 1930s and 40s were created in a deeply discriminatory manner through mechanisms designed by Southern Democrats that specifically excluded farm workers. The gap between blacks and whites actually widened despite post-war prosperity. In the words of noted historian Eric Fauner, Katznelson's incisive book should change the terms of debate about affirmative action and about the last 70 years of American history.
So we'll have the schedule posted online when these episodes will drop.
Okay, should I say that Ira Katznelson is professor of political science and history at Columbia University.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah, totally. Uh-oh.
Not after our podcast.